This is topic 5.10 and 5.13, which talks about city growth, which is urbanization, and then also some problems with urban runoff and ways to prevent it. All right, so first slide talks about what the word urbanization is. All right, so when people move to cities or a certain area becomes more densely populated, we say that is urbanization. So urban populations are 55% of human population, but are responsible for consuming 75% of Earth's resources. So how do we define it? If you have 386 people per square kilometer or 1,000 people per square mile, it's considered urban. This also includes the suburbs. So where I live, it's suburban, but it's technically urban because we have that much population density. Okay, so what are some advantages? Why do people want to move to cities and live in a city? Usually there are better jobs, more job opportunities in a city. There's usually better healthcare. Why is there better healthcare? Because you have more people, and so when there's more people, you have those specialists. For example, I live near Los Angeles, and we can go to any specialist we need to go to in the Los Angeles area. But I know of friends who live in other states and they have to drive to another state or fly to another state sometimes to get medical care because they don't have certain specialists they need. Okay, there's also art. So people love going to the theater, to music, concerts, cultural events, museums, sports. So if you like professional sports, you're going to find those in a city. And also public transportation. A lot of people don't want to own a car. It's expensive and it's a hassle and it can be time consuming and it can be stressful. So a lot of people prefer public transportation. What's an environmental advantage? Well, usually because people live in smaller homes in an urban area, and that could be apartments or just smaller houses, you have a lower ecological and carbon footprint. Also, in a lot of cities where people don't drive much or even own a car, in some cities you don't even have to own a car, then you're going to save not just money, but you're not going to emit those air pollutants. All right, so what is a disadvantage? What's a problem living in cities? There's a higher concentration of people, which increases pollution, which increases trash. So our developed nations like the US and developing nations have differences in urban populations. So you can see we are developed, 75% of us live in urban. In developing countries, it's 48%. However, developing countries, when people do move to cities, they move to kind of a few cities and they end up getting really, really big. And in developed countries, we have more bigger cities, so those individual cities don't get as big. Now, in developing countries, because of all the people living there and all the sewage and all that stuff, you end up with more problems with safe drinking water and with sewage, which our developed cities do not have. So Los Angeles and New York and Chicago and Tokyo and London all have clean drinking water systems, all have sewage systems that work. All right, so take a look at these diagrams here. You can see that our percentage of people living in urban areas in the world has just surpassed 50%, and that's happened rather recently. In developed countries, you can see that the number is predicted to rise by 2030, and in less developed countries. So really our population growth is happening in less developed countries, and it's really happening in our cities. So yeah, cities keep on growing. All right, so why did people move to cities? About 100 years ago, they started really moving more to cities, and then people found that there were some problems with cities. So our urban areas became more crowded, and people are like, I don't want it as crowded, but I still want a good job in the city. So the development of the suburbs. And so these are areas that are surrounding your city centers that people can live outside of the city center. We also have exurbs. They're not really connected to the city center, but people will drive from this place to a city center to work. All right, you need to know the word urban sprawl. So take a look at this community here. So if people want to buy in here, you've got these lakes and you've got these walking paths, but how are you going to get to a store? There might be a little bit of stores here. Maybe you can walk to them, but where's your job? Where's the schools? Where are other stores? And it's miles and miles of roads. So living in the suburbs, you basically need a car and you have to drive everywhere. Things are not close together. And so when the land is cheap and you can spread out, it's called urban sprawl. Okay, so let's talk about why urban sprawl. So there are a few reasons. One of them is not human population growth. Okay, because down here, it says not population growth. This is a common misconception among students and people. You know, what is a reason for urban sprawl? People will say, well, there's more people in the world, so they've got to spread out. No, actually, in a lot of cities, when there's more people, they just build up. They just build more and more high rises. Think about New York City in that way, more and more and more high rises. So the cause of urban sprawl is not more people. You can just build up. The reason for urban sprawl is these reasons here. If you have people that can afford a car and the government builds highways, it makes it easy to buy a house in the suburbs. People also move to the suburbs because they can get a bigger house, sometimes a cheaper house in the suburbs than in the city. They can also get a yard in the suburbs as well. So these prices are usually cheaper than the city. Or they can get a bigger house for the same price that they would spend on a condo in the city. Most of the time, many times, the suburbs have better schools. And so people move to the suburbs because they want their students to have better schools. You also move to the suburbs if you can afford a car to drive to work. You also have problems in some cities. Now, some city centers are really nice and people want to live there, but the cost of real estate is very high. In other places, people don't want to live in the cities because we call it urban blight, but there's trash, there's pollution, there's homeless people that don't have a place to live. There can be crime, there can be, again, pollution, and so people move out of the city for a safer environment and less pollution and trash, etc. People move to the suburbs because of less crime. People also move to the suburbs when the governments fund the highways. The governments can also subsidize mortgages in suburban areas. Again, more freeways and highways. That's repeated. All right, going on. So this is urban blight. So this is a positive feedback loop. So if you start to build suburbs and people are like, suburbs are great, let's move there, then the suburbs get the money. So where I live in Santa Clarita, we are a different city than the city of Los Angeles. But many of the people that live in my city drive to Los Angeles for work, but we pay our taxes to the city of Santa Clarita. So the city of LA is not getting the tax revenue, which means their budgets decline, which means they cut more services, which means that businesses leave, which means the neighborhood declines. And if the neighborhood declines, then more people are going to move to the suburbs, which means less tax revenue, which means more services are cut, etc. This is a positive feedback loop, and it's called urban blight. Okay, and so here's another positive feedback loop. Now remember, positive doesn't mean good, it just means keeps going in a forward direction. So our suburbs get bigger, more traffic, longer commutes, more gas used, Increased gas revenues. Now, we have taxes on our gasoline, which fund the construction of roads. So more gas is used, we have more tax money, we can build more roads. And when we build more roads, we can build more houses and more people move to the suburbs. So we also have some positive feedback loops that way. All right, so what are some problems with sprawl? More air pollution and greenhouse gases from personal car commuters. How does it impact wildlife? Well, it causes habitat fragmentation from all of these roads and neighborhoods, etc. How do we help? Wildlife corridors. You can see this one that's built over a road. So the wildlife can cross. And yes, they do. They find these wildlife corridors, and wildlife will go miles up and down a highway looking for a safe place to cross. And when they find one, they will cross there. Nature preserves can help too. Describe health effects caused by urban sprawl, asthma from more air pollution, obesity and heart disease from driving instead of walking or biking. This graphic down here actually shows the obesity rate. So as time has gone on, and this is also the number of miles per person. So if you drive more miles, your obesity rate goes higher. And it has over time as time has gone on. All right, so how do we limit urban sprawl? This happens to be a picture from my town where they have redone a section called Old Town Newhall, and they've built mixed use areas. So people can live up here in these condos and apartments, and down here are shops and theaters and restaurants and bus stops and all kinds of things that make it nice. You don't have to walk to get food or go to the movies. And there's also jobs nearby. So this is smart growth, where communities focus on strategies to develop sustainable and healthy communities. They want to create a sense of place. So when you go into this area, it is a nice area. It has meaningful characters. You can also do something called urban growth boundaries, which create a boundary for sprawl. Governments can also have tax incentives to build vertically into high rises instead of horizontally. That's something governments can do as well. This is some considerations for smart growth. How do we grow without a lot of sprawl? We create walkable neighborhoods. We mix residential, retail, recreational, and business land use together. It's the old-fashioned way, but done nicer and more safely. Encouraging stakeholder collaboration, so all the people should have an input into kind of things that they want. Preserve our open spaces, preserve our natural beauty, and make sure there's accesses to trains and buses for people so they don't have to have a car if they don't want. Okay, so here's some more impacts on the environment of urbanization. So an urban heat island is cities are hotter than the surrounding rural or suburban areas due to more asphalt and more concrete and the lack of trees. So you can see that this is a graph of temperature, and this is the city, and you can see it's higher here in the city compared to the suburbs or the rural or the pond or whatever. How can we reduce urban heat islands? We can plant more trees, we can create green spaces, we can create green roofs, we can use white pavement instead of black asphalt, we can paint our roofs white. Those are all things that can reduce urban heat islands. If you're ever asked a question about how urbanization leads to climate change, you need to understand that if you have less trees to sequester carbon. So remember, plants and trees keep carbon from the atmosphere and sequester it in the form of glucose, which they turn into starches, etc. So trees keep that carbon from the air inside of them. So if you have less trees, you have less carbon that's being sequestered. Also, if you are in a suburban situation, you're going to have more cars, which burn fossil fuels, which put more carbon in the atmosphere. Also, cities have a lot of electricity use. Cities have restaurants and stores that are open late at night. They use lights, they burn electricity, which burns usually fossil fuels to generate the electricity. Okay, so let's talk about our water supply. So greater populations in urban and suburban areas lead to more use of aquifers and surface waters for our agriculture, and municipal means city, so you need to know that word, municipal. If you overpump your aquifers, salt water, and you live near the shores, this is not everywhere, but places that, cities near the ocean, if you overpump your groundwater, salt water can come in, and it's called saltwater intrusion. Also, impervious surfaces, so pavement and other surfaces, don't allow water to soak in. And so you end up with it running into causing flooding on our streets or into our storm drains and going right to the ocean or a river instead of soaking in underground. So here's an example of saltwater intrusion. So if we have our fresh water keeps the salt water kind of at bay, you have density differences and they don't want to mix. But if you are now pulling that fresh water from this aquifer up to the city, it allows now salt water to intrude in that groundwater, which can contaminate it and make it unusable, or you have to build special desalination. Okay, some other problems here with urban runoff. You can see a gross picture there of some urban runoff. We have again, if it rains, it's not soaking in because you've put cement, you've put asphalt, and it's going to run off into gutters. Those gutters are going to flow untreated in most places into rivers, lakes, the oceans. So an impervious surface is something that cannot allow water to soak through. And so impervious surfaces are, again, cement, asphalt, brick, etc. So if we reduce impervious surfaces, it would mitigate. Mitigate means to fix the issue, as well as places where water can flow to rather than remain in one area and causing flooding. So we want that water to soak in underground. So how do we do that? What are these ways we can create more soaking underground? So permeable pavement is a certain type of thing. We'll see that picture in a minute. You can also use decomposed granite walkways. So this is a decomposed granite walkway. It's rather sturdy. You can push a stroller on it, you can ride a bike on it, you can walk on it, but it allows water to soak through. Also notice there's trees and there's mulch and all those things. And so instead of a cement walkway, a decomposed granite walkway can help with this problem. Okay, so there is also products that you can buy that you can put at your house or in your driveway called permeable pavement. And so what it does is it actually allows water to soak through. Now, there was an FRQ one year about measuring the effectiveness of permeable pavement. So how would you do that? So you could have permeable pavement on one side, traditional pavement on another. You could use a ruler to measure the level of water above the permeable pavement and then pouring the water and checking that how much water does soak through. So you can pause the video, take a look at how that experiment might be done. All right, so some other ways to reduce urban runoff. We have rooftop gardens can soak in some water, and you can have a beautiful garden at the top of a building that can also sequester carbon, provide stress relief, grow food, etc. Electric buses that do not pollute into the waters are great. Permeable pavement that allows water to soak through. Sometimes you can even have stones like this, but there's gaps between the stones that allow the water to soak through. Tall buildings instead of wide buildings. So in between the tall buildings, you can have parks and empty spaces, or just planters and ground and trees in between the tall buildings, and allow more little parks and more trees and planters for water to soak through and prevent runoff. All right, that's it for sections 5:10 and 5:13.